Go picture this. It's 1957, a 1,000-mile road rally across America, and the starting line is packed with everything Detroit can throw at it. Cadillacs, Lincolns, Chrysler Imperials, 300 horsepower V8s and cars weighing 3 tons. And then there's this bubble-shaped microcar from Germany with 2 cylinders, 65 horsepower, and a door that opens from the front like a refrigerator. Everyone laughed until it didn't just finish, until it beat almost everyone. This is the story of how BMW's automotive punchline humiliated Detroit's finest. Welcome to 1957 America. 1957. America is at peak automotive insanity. Cadillac has just released the Eldorado Brougham with air suspension and a perfume dispenser. Yes, a perfume dispenser. Because apparently that's what American luxury needed, not better brakes or handling or visibility. Perfume. For your car. Chrysler's got tail fins so big you could hang glide off them. Ford's Fairlane is 17 feet long and weighs 2 tons. These aren't cars, they're statements. They're mobile living rooms. They're proof that you've made it in post-war America. The average American car in '57 makes around 250 horsepower from a V8, displacing over 400 cubic inches. Some are pushing 300 horsepower from the factory. For driving to the grocery store, gas costs 24 cents a gallon. Parking spaces are enormous. Highways are being built specifically to accommodate these land yachts. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is thinking about efficiency. Fuel economy is for Europeans and people who hate fun. This is America. We won the war. We'll burn as much gas as we damn well please. Road rallies in America during this era were different from European events. We're not talking about racing here. No wheel-to-wheel competition, no drifting through mountain passes at insane speeds. These were endurance and efficiency tests. The mobile economy run was the biggest. It had been running since 1950 and was essentially a massive marketing event where car manufacturers could prove their vehicles were economical. Though, in 1957 America, economical meant you only needed to stop for gas every 300 miles instead of every 200. The bar was low. The rallies would run coast to coast or across major regions. Strict rules governed speed, routes, and driving conditions. Certified observers rode in each car to make sure nobody was cheating. The goal was simple: use the least amount of fuel over the distance. Sounds boring, right? Well, not when manufacturers were competing for bragging rights that would appear in every newspaper ad for the next 12 months. Winning meant sales. Sales meant money. Money meant more chrome and bigger tail fins next year. Entries came from everyone. GM would send Chevrolets and Pontiacs. Ford brought Fairlanes and Customs. Chrysler entered Plymouths and Dodges. Even American Motors showed up with Ramblers, their weird attempt at building sensible cars for Americans who didn't want to be sensible. Every major manufacturer treated this as serious business. Engineers prepared for months. Dealers watched the results closely. Consumers actually paid attention. And then there was the Isetta, the BMW Isetta. A car so small you could park 3 of them in the space of 1 Cadillac. A car so underpowered that a strong headwind was a legitimate concern. A car so ridiculous looking that people genuinely thought it was a joke when they first saw it. It had a door that opened from the front, the entire front, like a refrigerator. You stepped into it, not through a side door like a normal human being. This is where things get interesting. Because while Detroit was busy adding more chrome, bigger engines, and longer hoods, this tiny bubble car from a German motorcycle company was about to teach everyone a lesson in physics, engineering, and the difference between power and efficiency. A lesson Detroit didn't want to learn. A lesson that would embarrass them in front of the entire country. The BMW Isetta. Wise, what even is this thing? Let's talk about how we got here. Because the Isetta's origin story is almost as weird as the car itself. BMW in the early 1950s was broke. I'm talking selling the furniture broke. World War II had been unkind to German industry, and BMW's factories had been bombed, seized, or dismantled. They'd been building motorcycles to stay alive, but that wasn't enough. They needed a car, a cheap car. A car so cheap that Germans recovering from the war could actually afford it. Enter Iso, an Italian company that had been making refrigerators. Yes, refrigerators. They decided to build a microcar because apparently making fridges to building cars is a natural progression. Their designer, BMW Isetta, created this bubble-shaped thing with a motorcycle engine, 3 wheels, and a front opening door. It looked like someone had tried to draw a car from memory after seeing one exactly once. BMW took one look at this Italian refrigerator on wheels. In 1955, BMW started production of their version. They fixed some of ISO's more questionable decisions. They added a 4th wheel because 3-wheel cars tend to, fall over. They upgraded from a 300cc engine to a 298cc single cylinder, then later to a 297cc twin cylinder, making a whopping 13 horsepower. 13 horsepower from 2 cylinders. My electric toothbrush makes more power. But here's where it gets interesting. The Isetta weighed 770 pounds. Excuse, that's not a typo. 770 pounds. A modern Harley-Davidson weighs more than that. This created a power-to-weight ratio that was actually not completely terrible. Still terrible, but not completely terrible. The design was beyond weird. You got in through the front. The entire front end was the door. The steering column and instrument panel were attached to the door and swung out with it. This meant parallel parking was different. You'd pull up, open the door, and step directly onto the sidewalk. Genius, actually, except when you parked facing a wall and couldn't get out. The engine was in the back, a motorcycle engine from BMW's existing bike lineup. Air-cooled, chain-driven to the rear wheels. Yes, wheels. Plural. Because unlike the Italian version, BMW's Isetta had 2 rear wheels spaced close together. This technically made it a 4-wheeler, though calling it that seems generous. The transmission was a 4-speed manual. 4 speeds. In a car with 13 horsepower. That's like having a 6-speed transmission in a golf cart. But again, weight. The thing was so light that you could actually get it moving. The top speed was around 50 miles per hour if you were brave and going downhill with a tailwind. 60 if you were suicidal and had removed everything not legally required. The ride was, let's say, intimate with the road surface. You felt every pebble, every crack, every expression of doubt on the asphalt's face. Americans who saw the Isetta in the mid-50s thought it was either a toy, a joke, or some kind of European prank. Car magazines reviewed it with thinly veiled contempt. One journalist wrote that it looked like a beach ball that had been in a fight with a lawnmower. Another called it proof that Germans have forgotten how to make cars. Sales were predictably terrible in America. A few hipster types in California bought them. Some college professors used them for commuting because they were cheap and quirky. But mainstream America, no chance. This was a country where having a small car was social suicide, where your car's size directly correlated to your worth as a human being. But someone at BMW had different ideas. They'd been entering Isettas in European rallies with modest success. The car's tiny engine sipped fuel like a tea-drinking grandmother. Its lightweight construction meant it could tackle mountain roads without overheating. Its small size made it nimble in traffic and parking. And then someone got the absolutely insane idea to enter one in the mobile economy run, in America, against every major car manufacturer in the country, in a car that looked like it was designed by someone who'd only had cars described to them via telegram. The mobile economy run, the rally. Nobody expected. The mobile economy run of 1957 was a big deal. Not quite as prestigious as European rallies, but in America, it mattered. It ran from Los Angeles to Sun Valley, Idaho, covering just over 1,000 miles through desert, mountains, and varying conditions designed to test real-world fuel efficiency. The rules were strict. Certified observers rode in each car. Every gallon of fuel was measured precisely. Speeds were regulated. No drafting, no coasting with the engine off, no tricks. Just drive the specified route at the specified speeds and use as little fuel as possible. The winner would be determined by ton miles per gallon, a formula that accounted for vehicle weight, so that heavy cars weren't automatically disqualified. The 1957 run had 57 entries. Everything from full-size Chevrolet Bel Airs to Plymouth Furies to Rambler Americans. The smallest economy car from a major manufacturer was probably the Nash Metropolitan, which displaced 91 cubic inches and weighed around a ton. And then there was the Isetta, the BMW Isetta 300, with its 297 cubic centimeter engine making 13 horsepower in stock form. Wait, the hook said 65 horsepower. What gives? Here's where the story gets better. The Isetta entered in the run wasn't stock. BMW had been developing a racing version for European hill climbs and circuit racing. These versions got modified engines, better carburetors, tuned exhausts, and could make up to 65 horsepower, still from 2 cylinders, still from 300 cubic centimeters. 65 horsepower sounds pathetic until you remember the weight. 770 pounds became more like 800, with the racing modifications and safety equipment. That's a power-to-weight ratio of around 12 pounds per horsepower. The average American car in 1957 had around 15 pounds per horsepower. The Isetta was actually competitive in terms of power to weight, but nobody knew this. All they saw was a bubble car with a refrigerator door showing up to compete against real cars. The reactions were predictably dismissive. One Chevrolet engineer was quoted in a pre-rally article saying the Isetta might make good time if the route goes through a shopping mall. A Plymouth executive called it that toy from Germany. Even the rally organizers seemed embarrassed. They listed the Isetta separately in the entry documentation, like they didn't know where else to put it. The crew running the Isetta consisted of 2 German engineers who barely spoke English and 1 American BMW dealer from California who had agreed to this madness because he thought it might generate publicity, which it did, just not the kind he initially expected. The starting line in Los Angeles was a circus. Big cars, loud engines, chrome everywhere. Photographers documented every entry. When they dispatched to the Isetta, most of them laughed. One photo from the event shows a Cadillac Eldorado parked next to the Isetta. The Eldorado's hood is longer than the entire Isetta. It's comical. The night before the rally, the BMW crew got death threats. Okay, not death threats, but strongly worded suggestions that they withdraw before embarrassing themselves and wasting everyone's time. American manufacturers saw the Isetta as mockery. Here was this German company, barely a decade after the war, showing up with what looked like a motorized egg to compete against American engineering. The German engineers ignored them. They'd done the math. They knew their power-to-weight ratio. They understood aerodynamics better than Detroit ever would. The Isetta had a drag coefficient around 0.4, which in 1957 was borderline witchcraft. American cars were basically brick walls with wheels. The Isetta was a rolling teardrop. Fuel capacity was 10.5 liters, less than 3 gallons. This terrified everyone, except the German engineers, who calmly explained through their translator that they wouldn't need more. Nobody believed them. The engineering that actually worked. Let's get technical for a minute, because this is where the Isetta stopped being a joke and started being legitimate engineering. That 65 horsepower engine was a masterpiece of efficiency. BMW had taken their motorcycle engine and tuned it specifically for sustained high RPM operation. The modifications included a completely reworked cylinder head with improved porting, better valve angles, a higher compression ratio, achieved through milled surfaces and custom pistons. The compression jumped from around 6.5 to 1 in the stock engine to 9.5 to 1 in the racing version. This meant more complete combustion, more power per fuel molecule. The carburetor was a downdraft Wubber, a racing unit that was more common on Italian sports cars than German microcars. It could meter fuel with absurd precision. The intake manifold was custom, with runners designed to optimize the pressure waves at specific RPMs. This gave the little engine a surprising amount of mid-range torque. The exhaust was a tune system, not just straight pipes, but actual tuned length headers that used resonance to help scavenge exhaust gases and improve breathing. The result was an engine that could make 65 horsepower at 7,000 RPM while sipping fuel like it was rationed. Fuel consumption in ideal conditions was around 90 miles per gallon. 90. The average American car in 1957 got maybe 15 miles per gallon. The Isetta was 6 times more efficient. But raw efficiency wasn't the only advantage. Aerodynamics played a massive role. The Isetta's bubble shape was accidentally perfect. It had minimal frontal area, smooth curves, an enclosed underbody, and almost no protrusions to disturb airflow. The drag coefficient of around 0.4 was better than anything Detroit would achieve until the 1980s. Compare this to a 1957 Chevy Bel Air, huge flat grille, chrome bumpers sticking out, massive tail fins acting as air brakes, an open underbody with the exhaust system hanging down, creating turbulence. The Bel Air's drag coefficient was probably around 0.6 or worse. This meant it needed substantially more power to maintain highway speeds. Weight distribution was another factor. The Isetta's engine was in the back, over the drive wheels. This meant excellent traction for a rear-wheel drive car. The front was so light that steering was almost comically easy. You could turn the wheel with one finger. On mountain roads with switchbacks, this nimbleness would prove crucial. The chassis was a monocoque design, basically a reinforced bubble. No separate frame, just a steel shell that acted as both body and structure. This saved weight and actually provided decent rigidity. It wasn't safe by modern standards, obviously. A crash would turn you into paste. But for rally purposes, the low weight and rigidity meant the car handled predictably. Tire choice was critical. The racing Isetta ran on narrow tires, but with high pressure for low rolling resistance. The contact patches were tiny, but the lightweight meant they generated enough grip. On dry pavement, the Isetta could corner surprisingly hard. Not sports car hard, but definitely harder than its appearance suggested. Cooling was handled by air, obviously. No radiator meant no coolant to leak, no hoses to burst, no water pump to fail. In the desert sections of the rally, this would prove vital. American cars with their big V8 engines and inadequate cooling systems would overheat. The Isetta would just keep buzzing along, its engine cooled by simple airflow. The transmission's 4 speeds were perfectly spaced for the engine's power band. First gear could get you moving quickly. Second gear was for city speeds. Third gear handled most open road situations. Fourth gear was an overdrive for sustained highway cruising at around 45 to 50 miles per hour. Could the Isetta match the top speed of American cars? Absolutely not. But the rally didn't require top speed. It required maintaining specific average speeds while using minimal fuel. The Isetta's strengths perfectly matched the challenge's requirements. The German engineers had done something Detroit either couldn't or wouldn't do. They'd built a car with one specific purpose: efficiency. Not comfort, not status, not style. Just pure mechanical efficiency. Every component served that goal. No wasted weight, no unnecessary complexity. No compromises for marketing reasons. Detroit built cars that did everything poorly. The Isetta did one thing extremely well, and in a rally testing exactly that one thing, the results were predictable. If anyone had been paying attention. 1,000 miles of proving. Every one wrong day. One started at dawn in Los Angeles. The route led northeast through the Mojave Desert before hitting mountain passes on the way to Las Vegas. 180 miles of mostly straight desert highway, followed by twisty mountain roads. The Isetta left the starting line to scattered applause and muffled laughter. The bigger cars roared off with their V8s rumbling. The Isetta buzzed away like an angry mosquito. The sound was not impressive. It sounded mechanical, industrial, almost agricultural. Nothing like the throaty American V58s. First checkpoint was 60 miles out. The German engineers had calculated they could run the first leg on their initial 3 gallons without refueling. This seemed insane. Even the economy-focused Rambler needed fuel every 80 miles. But when the Isetta rolled into the checkpoint, the observers checked the tank. Still had fuel. The Germans declined to refuel. This was psychological warfare. Every other car had stopped for gas at least once. The Isetta hadn't. The observers made note. Other crews started paying attention. The desert section was brutal. Temperatures hit 105 degrees. American cars started overheating. A Plymouth Belvedere blew a radiator hose at mile 70. A Ford Customs temperature gauge pegged. Cars were pulling over, engines steaming, crews frantically adding water. The Isetta, with its air-cooled engine, just kept going. The German engineers had the windows down and looked bored. At mile 120, the route hit mountain passes. This was supposed to be where the Isetta died. Underpowered cars struggle with elevation gain. The American entries dropped into lower gears and powered up the grades. The Isetta dropped into second gear, the engine screaming at 6,000 RPM, and climbed slowly but steadily. Here's where things got weird. On the twisty mountain sections, the Isetta started passing people. Not because it was faster in a straight line, obviously, but because it could take corners at higher speeds. The lightweight meant it could brake later and accelerate earlier. The narrow track meant it could use more of the road. The tight wheelbase meant it could pivot through switchbacks. A Buick Special, huffing and puffing up the grades, watched the Isetta buzz past on the inside of a hairpin turn. The Buick driver's report later noted, the BMW appeared to be defying several laws of physics. Day 1 ended in Las Vegas. Total distance around 230 miles. Every car refueled. The organizers measured fuel consumption precisely. The Isetta had used less than 5 gallons. 5 gallons for 230 miles. That's 46 miles per gallon. The next closest competitor, a Rambler American, had managed 31. But here's what nobody expected. When they calculated ton miles per gallon, accounting for vehicle weight, the Isetta's numbers were absurd. It was getting over 200 ton miles per gallon. The Rambler, which weighed almost double, was getting around 60 ton miles per gallon. The German engineers said nothing. They smiled politely, declined interviews, and went to bed early. Day 2 was Vegas to Salt Lake City. 370 miles of high desert, more mountains, and varying conditions. This was supposed to be the real test. Distance, elevation changes, sustained highway speeds. The American crews were getting nervous. Word had spread about the Isetta's Day 1 performance. Suddenly, this wasn't funny anymore. Engineers from GM and Ford were studying the little BMW at rest stops, trying to figure out what BMW had done. What they found was nothing illegal. Just a very light car with a very efficient engine running at optimal RPM ranges for fuel economy. No tricks, no cheating, just physics and engineering done properly. The mountain sections of Day 2 were worse than Day 1. Steeper grades, higher elevations, colder temperatures. A Chrysler Windsor overheated so badly the engine seized. A Chevrolet Bel Air blew a head gasket at 7,000 feet. American cars were dying. The Isetta kept buzzing along. The air-cooled engine didn't care about altitude. Less oxygen meant less power, sure, but it also meant the engine ran cooler. The German engineers had calculated all of this. They had tested at elevation. They knew exactly what would happen. At one checkpoint, a journalist asked the lead German engineer how the car was performing. Through the translator, he responded, "As expected." That's it, as expected, like they'd known all along that this would work. Day 2 ended with the Isetta still leading in ton miles per gallon. It wasn't even close anymore. The gap was widening. Other manufacturers were starting to get desperate. A Ford engineer was allegedly caught trying to inspect the Isetta's fuel system after hours. He claimed he was just curious. Day 3 was the final push. Salt Lake City to Sun Valley, Idaho. 420 miles through some of the most challenging terrain of the entire rally. Mountain passes, high altitude, cold temperatures, and the final sprint to the finish. This was where everyone expected the Isetta to fail. Long, sustained highway speeds at high altitude. The tiny engine would have to run at maximum RPM for hours. Surely it would overheat, seize, or simply run out of breath. The first 100 miles were fine. The Isetta maintained 50 miles per hour on flat sections, dropping to 35 on steep grades. It was slow, but it was consistent, and fuel consumption remained absurdly low. Then came the worst mountain pass of the entire rally. A 15-mile climb at an average 7% grade, with sections hitting 12%. American cars were downshifting into second gear, engines screaming, transmissions overheating. 2 cars had to stop completely to let their brakes cool after descending the other side. The Isetta climbed in second gear at 25 miles per hour. It took almost 40 minutes to crest the summit, but it crested, and the fuel consumption barely budged. And on the descent, the German engineers used engine braking and careful speed control to regenerate some efficiency on the way down. The final 100 miles to Sun Valley were almost anticlimactic. The Isetta rolled across the finish line, having completed the entire 1,000 plus miles using less than 23 gallons of fuel. 23 gallons. That's over 44 miles per gallon, over incredibly challenging terrain. The next closest competitor managed 28 miles per gallon. Good, but not even close. When the final ton miles per gallon calculations came out, the Isetta had averaged over 220 ton miles per gallon for the entire rally. The second place car, a Rambler, hit 73. The BMW Isetta, the car everyone had laughed at, the bubble-shaped joke from Germany, had won the economy category by a margin so large it was almost insulting. The results, an industry meltdown. The press conference after the rally was chaos. German engineers who'd barely spoken English for 3 days suddenly had to answer questions from 100 journalists who couldn't believe what they'd just witnessed. The final official results showed BMW Isetta 300, 44.2 miles per gallon, 223 ton miles per gallon. Rambler American, 28.1 miles per gallon, 73 ton miles per gallon. Plymouth Plaza, 22.4 miles per gallon, 52 ton miles per gallon. Everything else was worse. The German engineers explained their approach through the translator. They'd built a car specifically for efficiency. Lightweight, minimal drag, optimized engine. Nothing revolutionary, just good engineering applied honestly. American journalists couldn't wrap their heads around it. How could a car with 13 horsepower stock, 65 modified, beat everything Detroit could build? One journalist asked if they'd cheated. The lead engineer smiled and said the car had been inspected multiple times. Everything was legal. Detroit's response was predictably bitter. General Motors issued a statement saying the Isetta represented a different vehicle class and couldn't be fairly compared to real automobiles. Ford said the result was interesting but not relevant to American consumers. Chrysler said nothing officially, but internal memos allegedly called it a disaster for industry credibility. Independent automotive magazines were more honest. Motor Trend ran an article titled "The Germans Are Coming" that praised BMW's engineering and questioned why American manufacturers couldn't achieve similar efficiency. Road and Track called it a masterclass in purpose-built design. Consumer reaction was mixed. Some Americans saw the Isetta as proof that maybe bigger wasn't always better. Others doubled down on American excess and called the BMW a toy. Sales of Isettas in America jumped slightly after the rally, but it was still a niche product. Americans weren't ready to embrace microcars yet, but something had shifted. The myth of American automotive superiority had been dented. A German company, using a design that looked ridiculous, had beaten everyone at their own game. It planted a seed. Maybe efficiency mattered. Maybe engineering intelligence could triumph over brute force. BMW used the victory in every advertisement for the next 2 years. Photos of the Isetta at the finish line appeared in magazines worldwide. The tagline was simple: Economy by BMW. They didn't need to explain further. The results spoke clearly enough. The racing version of the Isetta became a legend in Europe. BMW sold modified engines and performance parts to enthusiasts who wanted to build their own rally Isettas. A small but dedicated community of Isetta racers emerged, competing in hill climbs and economy runs across Europe. American manufacturers quietly started paying more attention to efficiency. Not much, but some. The seeds of what would eventually become the fuel economy crisis of the 70s were planted here. Someone at GM allegedly started a secret project to study microcar design, though nothing came of it for years. The 2 German engineers who piloted the Isetta through the rally became minor celebrities in Germany. They returned home to a parade in Munich. BMW gave them both promotions. One of them would go on to work on the BMW 700, the car that would save BMW from bankruptcy in the early 60s. What this tiny bubble car proved: the 1957 mobile economy. Run victory is mostly forgotten now. The Isetta is remembered, if at all, as a quirky microcar, a novelty, something collectors restore for car shows. But that rally proved something important. It proved that assumptions are dangerous. Everyone assumed the Isetta was too small, too weak, too ridiculous to compete. But assumptions aren't engineering. The German engineers didn't assume, they calculated. It proved that purpose-built design beats compromise every time. Detroit built cars that tried to be everything: fast, comfortable, stylish, economical. The Isetta was built for one thing, and in a competition testing that one thing, it dominated. It proved that efficiency is its own kind of performance. Speed isn't just about horsepower. Sometimes speed is about using less, doing more with less, being smarter rather than stronger. The Isetta story resonates today maybe more than ever. We're facing questions about efficiency, sustainability, electric vehicles, and whether we need massive trucks and SUVs for everyday transportation. The Isetta's answer was delivered in 1957. You don't need excess. You need appropriate engineering. Modern car enthusiasts look at the Isetta and see a joke, but that joke beat everyone. That joke climbed mountains, crossed deserts, and made American automotive engineers question their entire philosophy. That joke proved that different isn't always worse. Sometimes it's just different in exactly the right way. The 65 horsepower two-cylinder BMW Isetta that shocked everyone in 1957 wasn't a miracle. It was just good engineering applied honestly. No marketing, no flash, no excess. Just a light car with an efficient engine doing exactly what it was designed to do. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's more than enough. Sometimes that's everything.